it would be organize yourself, get some good finance people behind you in the community, and come forward with and some good discussions with the town's finance department and the CAO, and say, let's talk about the numbers and the money right now. How is this going to work? And certainly, I'm going to finish now, thank you, we can't take things like the Y off the table, even if it's going to cost more money. There is no question in my mind that if we say yes to this project today, tomorrow, or next week, it's going to cost everybody in this town money. So and we need those kinds of partnerships, or it's definitely no. That's my opinion, and I'll share it with you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you guys for your presentation and for coming in. I've been traveling the country with Kim and Tara in the last 6 months at hockey tournaments, looking at many of those same facilities and wishing that we had some of those in Saugeen Shores. But, you know, it's interesting that the one we were in last weekend, up in Huntsville, is a really fancy facility, but built with a pretty large chunk of federal money from the G8 conference. And that's how a small town like this gets one of these things done. It was how we built the Centennial Pool. Right, it was with support. We don't build infrastructure like that by ourselves, and I just flogging a dead horse because my colleagues have already said it. But the fact is that to build that Cadillac, the one that we all would like to see, that $21 million is something we just cannot self-finance without putting ourselves in great financial peril. I say that every time this comes up. And I say it again because it's important to be really clear. It's just not something the town of Saugeen Shores can do because we can't borrow that much money without putting the municipality at financial risk. So we need money from somewhere else. So the point I wanted to make to you was that to consider working with us to broaden out your lobbying effort to those federal and provincial members of Parliament, something we need to do too. Particularly, Councillor Myatt pointed out that there's a new grant program that's they're working on now through this agreement, and the details of it aren't clear yet, and we're not clear how much money we're going to be eligible for. So that's all good. That means we could be eligible for however much we can manage to wring out of them, and so we need to lobby for that, though, and we need to work on that. And so I guess that would be the one bit of encouragement and one comment I would make today is we need that support from other levels of government, so we should work together and try to get that support. But thank you very much for coming in, and I certainly support what you're doing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further comments? If not, thank you for coming. I'll just say, not add a lot more, but I sat here for many years and seen how projects succeed. And they succeed with ideas from people from the community that get together and bring the idea forward and help council find a solution to that problem. And I admire the efforts you're putting in here. And so let's work together to a solution as fast as we can. Thank you. So then our next delegation is Saber Sikter. I hope I pronounced that right. And, is that close? Thank you. He's here about changes to the refreshment policy. Welcome, Saber. If you just push the activate the mic if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We really appreciate your time that giving us at least 10 minutes, but I'm not sure how I'm going to fill 10 minutes with my speech. First of all, this is the first time I'm speaking in front of the Council, and hope you'll forgive my accent, if you don't mind. So it's better that way. My name is Subur Shikdar. I came in this country about almost 30 years ago with nothing. And I started going back to school, learning the language, and start building my career. Currently, I'm working as a business development manager in an IT service-related company. And this is my day job. At the same time, a couple of my friends started a business to make some extra money for next generation and to support our family, friends, and everybody else. So the company called Beyond the Horizon, LTC. LTC stands for Long-Term Care Facility. That's our intention. And that's one of the reasons we have started the business. And we bought some property right in Southampton. And the property was basically empty. There's only one store, which is the pizza store, I think New Orleans Pizza. And the pizza store, since we bought it, is all closed over the last 2.5 years, something like that. When we bought it, it was also closed. So we was thinking about to renovate this place. Before we renovate, what we did, we gathered a couple of friends, some finance, and we put it together to do a start of the business. And now when I see this nice little town and a lot of traffic, especially during the summer months, there's a lot of traffic, and it's right beside a highway. And that highway, we see a lot of traffic going back and forth, the nice little restaurants in the core town, core business area. They all go and eat on the restaurants, a nice facility, but they don't have anything that drive through people, like a fast food. Basically, there is none. So we decided to, thought about it, we put out all together and asked one of my co-workers to go and visit the city hall, see if there is any problem, we can open a food truck there. The city was giving us verbal confirmation, yes, it's your property, it's your land, you can do business, any business as long as permitted by the city, and especially they are authorized by the food inspection. So we start looking at the truck. Finally, we got one. It's pretty expensive. We had no idea that it's going to be about close to $90,000. So invested that money, bring the truck here, and ask for the permit. We was given permit, and we understood that it's going to be followed by always next 2-3 years as long as we wish to run the business. And I think it was in January, end of January, I sent one of my coworkers, because I live in Toronto, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to mention. It's a long drive for me to come here. So I asked him, can you go and have a look with the city hall, that what's the status for this year? Are we going to get it? Then he found it out that city have some kind of planning commissions. They're going to be looking into that and make the decision. So that panics all of us, because my money is sitting there, and if we cannot run this business, I have no options to put the truck there. So that's one of the reasons I come to present ourselves to explain what we are looking. And hope the city and the council will recognize that the effort that we put together money to buy this store, buy this truck, and servicing the local community, walk-in people, those who deserve some kind of, quick food with a hot dog, French fries and all those things. So probably that's the only place they can go. And if you have a nice restaurant, they go and sit there. How many people have time during the lunch hour to sit down for an hour to have lunch? They're always on the run. And the traffic is flowing on that highway, so they stop the pickup and they drive back again. So those are the thoughts we put it together, and based on that, we request you again to offer us the permit, and hopefully we do. And the second thing I want to mention also, while I'm here, may not have opportunity all the time to come, that place we have intention to do something more, because we are starting to renovate that. There are a couple of people are going to be coming from Toronto, start renovating place, probably we will rent it out. And we had a plan also like a hookah parlor, but we changed our mind recently in the last few days. May not be a good idea here. So we decided, thinking about extend that, going beyond that, to build upper level on that. A couple of apartment may be a good idea, because there's a lot of shortage of people. I know a few friends of mine, they come from Toronto, they stay in a motel, different places, for a couple of months, work on the Bruce Power, and they go back again. They told me that they have very little area to find a rental place, monthly rental place where you can have a kitchen. So building an apartment, they will be having kitchen there. And they can make their own food, bring food, and how many times you can go and eat in the restaurants if you are staying, months at a time. So those are the thoughts we have in our mind. And I believe council will consider us to run the business there, to get some, and hopefully we'll be able to be a good citizen here and pay taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sever. Any questions for him? If not, I think I can just say I think we'll have an answer for you shortly and have this issue dealt with.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So now we will move to 5.5.1, which is the harbor report. And I guess Jane will present, and Jane or have we got it? Frank? Go ahead. Are you going to introduce your? Go ahead, Frank, and you can introduce your consultants. Thanks very much.
Good evening. Thank you. At the request of this council, approximately 18 months ago, we approached a review of the Port Elgin Harbor, and we retained a consultant, and I'm pleased to report tonight that consultant is here to present his report. Where we go from here, staff will ensure that a copy of the final version will be available online for anybody who wishes to read the full copy, and we will certainly reach out to the harbor users to present this information to that user group as well. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Glenn Pincombe of Touristics and Milo Strum of Shoreplan Engineering, and they have a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and staff. As Frank said, my name's Glenn Pincombe. I'm the managing partner of Touristics Consulting, and my colleague here is Milo Sturman. He's the president of Shoreplan Engineering, and it was our two firms that undertook the study that Frank is referring to. What we did as part of that study was to review all of the existing recreational boating facilities in Bruce and Grey counties, since that represents the area that a good portion of the boaters come from. We undertook an analysis of trends in recreational boating and marinas. We looked at the population projections between 2017 and 2037, and we also looked at the projection in the length, the beam, that is the width, and the draft of boats in both the seasonal and the transient boater market. We conducted an operational review of Port Elgin Harbor Marina. We also looked at the financials for the period between 2009 and 2016. And based on that, we provided recommendations for facilities and services that we believe the marina needs to continue for the next 20 years. And at the end of that, we provided a capital development plan that will give you an indication as to how you would move along with that. This slide and the next slide give you an indication of the facilities that both your marina and the other facilities in Grey and Bruce counties have. Now, it's not a bad thing that the marina here doesn't have all of those facilities. For example, laundry facilities are quite frankly nice to have, but they don't produce a lot of money in terms of revenue, and they're not really essential to the operation of a marina. On the other hand, because it's projected that boats 40 feet and longer is sort of where the growth is in terms of boats now, it is key that the marina provide much longer slips than are currently available. As you can see on the second one, what we've done here is actually the green lines indicate ones that both the marina here has and the other facilities have as well. And the red ones was supposed to be an indication of the ones that you don't have. And quite frankly, the only one on this slide that is of particular importance is the fact that you don't have any 50 amp service at the marina. And because of what's happening with these bigger boats, they've got all kinds of toys on them nowadays, like air conditioning. Even some of them now have hot tubs and that sort of thing. And as a result, they're requiring more and more power. And as a result of that, typically marinas are moving to having 50 amp power. So that's another suggestion that we think you should carry through with. What this slide does is it gives you an indication of sort of how you compare with the other facilities in Grey and Bruce counties. And I think what is significant here is that you have a much greater percentage of very short slips, that is those under 26 feet, and you don't have slips that are over 46 feet. And so what we're suggesting that you probably should do is to reduce the number of slips that are 26 feet and lower, reduce the number of unserviced slips, increase the number of slips 46 feet and over, or actually add those kinds of slips, and add 50 amp power. When we were reviewing the facilities in the two counties, we looked at the fees for all of the services that the marinas provide. And what it indicated to us was that Port Elgin Harbor Marina is in the sort of the middle to upper middle range in terms of fees. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in the case of some things, but our recommendation would be, because you are in fact at the highest level of any of the facilities as far as unserviced slips are concerned, if you want to in effect continue to attract those types of boaters, our suggestion is that you probably should reduce the fees for unserviced slips, but keep in line the fees for other facilities. What this schematic shows is the current outline of slips in the marina. And what's important here is that docks B, C, and H do very, very well. Docks F and I don't do so well. And as you can see on this slide, the slips and docks that are 30 feet or longer in length all have occupancy rates that are greater than 90%. Those that are much shorter, i.e. 24 to 28 feet or 20 feet, have occupancy rates that are much lower. And in fact, when we look at industry norms, typically when you have occupancy rates that low, they're not profitable. So as a result, what we're suggesting is that you increase the number of longer docks, i.e. those 30 feet and longer, and decrease the number of docks that are under 29 feet. What this slide indicates is that there's going to be an increase in the number of power and sailboaters within the areas of highest potential for your marina. And in particular, the age group 65 and over is going to increase dramatically. Those in the 25 to 34 group are going to bounce all over the place. They're going to decrease, then they're going to increase, and then they're going to decrease and increase again. But what it means in terms of the older market is that you should provide wider finger docks and more stable finger docks, because, I mean, obviously, for those of us who are approaching that, well, I'm 65, so I've approached that age already. But those that are approaching that age and over that, you need a more stable surface to be on. What this slide demonstrates is that there is an increase in the number of power and sailboaters within your seasonal market area. But what is particular here is that between the years 2027 and 2030, there actually is going to be a decrease in the number of seasonal boaters, or the number of power and sailboaters.
which means it'll be difficult to attract new boaters to your facility. So what will be important during that time period is to do everything you can to retain the existing boaters, because you won't be able to attract new ones. What this slide indicates is that there is an increase in the number of boats between 30 and 36 and less than 36 feet, the red line. There is an increase in boats between 36 and 46 feet, the green line. And also there is an increase in the number of boats 46 feet and greater in length. So what we're suggesting here is that you increase the number of docks that are 36 to 46 feet to meet that growing demand, and that you add docks 46 feet or greater in length to address that market as well. We we didn't do it. Town staff did it. There was an online survey that was done, and what we did is we looked at the transient and the seasonal boaters, and what it indicated to us is that the markets that the marina is currently attracting are Ontario, Michigan, and Ohio. And what is clear about that is that the projection for the number of boats of a greater length that is occurring in Ontario is occurring also in both Ohio and in Michigan. And what it means is that in the future you'll probably be attracting a greater number of Ontario boaters, but you will be looking at boaters who will be looking at a much bigger or longer slip, and those are the slips that will require a greater power output, i.e. 50 amps. We undertook an operational, did I do something here? Okay. We undertook an operational review of the marina itself, and we believe, based on that review, that the current operating model that you have in place should continue. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. We would, however, recommend that during the peak season, the number of casual staff should probably increase. It is on the low side relative to other marinas. We would also suggest that what you might consider is offering the harbor master a longer contract, i.e. something in the neighborhood of 3 years, which will allow that in a sense stability to take place within the marina, and will allow that person to transition programs and policies in a much better way. As I mentioned just a second ago, the town undertook an online survey of both seasonal and transient boaters, and we got in excess of 200 people who responded to that survey. And one of the things that was asked was what they thought of the marina management and the casual staff. And what is obvious from this slide is that the overall boaters are happy with both marina management and casual staff. The other thing that the survey looked at was what kind of amenities and services would boaters and residents like to see at the waterfront. What's clear from this slide is that the marina currently offers all of the facilities that are highly favored. The one drawback perhaps would be that boaters would like to see a more reliable Wi-Fi service. Apparently it's quite spotty. I mean, we heard that. I don't know for a fact that that's the case. The point is that everyone is sort of moving in the direction of using the internet and that sort of thing. So it would in fact be wise to make sure that sort of is top notch. This slide shows the facilities that were considered moderately favored. In this case, the only two that are currently at the marina are outdoor winter storage and washrooms and showers. There are other amenities and facilities on that chart that would in fact produce revenue. For example, a boater store, and one would be able to charge more for 50 amp power, so it would increase the revenue. A mast crane and a mobile travel lift could increase winter storage revenue, but it would only be profitable if you had, in fact, more boats to lift. The difficulty is that to make a mobile travel lift profitable, you probably require something in the neighborhood of 100 lifts or more, and we don't believe that there is enough space at the north end of the area to accommodate that. So it'll be a question that you'll wrestle with. It wouldn't be high on our list, as you'll see at the end. And then, as I mentioned earlier, laundry facilities, which you don't have, are nice to have, but they really aren't a moneymaker. Among the other favored facilities, bicycle rentals, tourist visitor kiosk, docks suitable for accommodating small cruise boats. Those kinds of things would certainly increase revenue. And in the case of the information kiosk and the storyboards, it would probably convince transient boaters to stay longer. The two items on this slide that are repair related are marked in red because it is our belief, based on experience in the industry, that the marina just isn't large enough to support on-site repair services. Typically what we're told is that there needs to be in excess of 125 to 150 boats stored over winter to allow a business to operate on a 12-month basis, and there just isn't sufficient space on the site to be able to do that. And this is the last part of the favored facilities. Again, you'll see that two of those are also repair related. Separate slips for charter and charter fishing and tour boat operators would certainly increase the revenue. So again, it's something that could be considered. One of the things that a number of marinas and yacht clubs are doing, though, that would be a good thing to look into, is that they are involving local businesses in things such as small boat rentals. In essence, what they're trying to do is to introduce people to boating at a younger age in the hopes that they will continue that interest in boating, and then when they become old enough, or they become, if you will, rich enough to buy a boat, that they will buy a boat, and they will be, in fact, in the future, a seasonal boater. So it's, in a sense, it's a backdoor way of getting at your seasonal boaters, or increasing your seasonal boaters. The review of the financials that we looked at between 2009 to 2016 indicates to us that it is a well-run marina. The marina operates within the industry norm for all of the major revenues and expense items. One thing that I think you should be commended on is the reserve or replacement budget that you in fact have set aside. There are a number of marinas in the province that don't do that, and it really is a battle when it comes to replacing docks or other facilities. So as they say, you're to be commended for that. In terms of Port Elgin's average net income as a percentage of the net revenue, it's 10.9%, and that compares very well with other marinas in the province of a similar size. The highest we were able to find was 11.5%, so you're not far off that, whereas the lowest is 7.8%. But one of the things that we would sort of recommend you continue to do in the future is to conduct an annual survey of marina fees and within Bruce and Grey counties, just to make sure that you're in the right range for those sort of things, because marinas are a very, very competitive business. What this slide and the next slide provides is a summary of what we're referring to as potential sources of increased or new revenue. I've already mentioned that longer slips with 50 amp power will do that. Tour boats and cruise ships could be attracted. Non-motorized boat rentals, as I said, is in partnership with a local business would be good, as would bicycle rentals. One of the things that is particular about this particular marina is that you draw boaters from a much greater distance than a lot of other boaters do. And when they're coming that far, and typically they're only here for a very few days, we believe that perhaps a concierge service that would prep the boat before they get here and do the other kinds of things, so that in essence they're able to make greater use of that boat when they are here, could probably be a revenue producing idea for the marina, and it probably would be profitable if it was priced properly. On the second slide, what we've suggested is a coin, as I said, a coin laundry service. I mean, it'll produce some revenue, but it wouldn't be very much. Vending machines is just, in a sense, to give people the kinds of things that they would want. One of the things that was very high on people's list was having a restaurant on site. And what we would suggest is, when the lease for the current facility is up, we would suggest that you gauge the interest of a local restaurant operator to see whether they would be interested in operating a seasonal satellite operation. It's our belief that a year-round restaurant on that site would not be profitable, but perhaps a satellite operation would be. And then the other amenity is learning experiences in partnership with, for example, the Port Elgin Yacht Club or the local power and sail squadron. Again, getting people interested in power and sail boating will allow you to continue to attract seasonal boaters. The last two slides indicate the recommended facilities and services that we are suggesting, the required budget, and the priority that we've put on them. And we've ranked them as high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And what we believe the highest priority would be is to replace Dock G right there. It's the longest one at the north end. We're suggesting that be the first priority in terms of removing that dock and providing a longer number of slips and docks in that area. Milo has costed that item out in terms of both a design contingency and in terms of a construction contingency at $1.4 million. Adding 50 amp power to 50% of the 40-foot slips at the south end of the basin on docks B and C is what we would consider the second highest priority, and that's in the neighborhood of $75,000. Replacing all the remaining slips at the north end of the basin, that's docks H, F, and I, with docks of a similar quality as those to the south end of the basin, including 30 amp power, would be sort of a third level of the highest priority, and that comes in around $1 million. So in essence, what we're talking is among the highest priority items, and there's no need to do all of these high priority items within the first year or two. I mean, in essence, we would suggest that you do the replacement of Dock G as soon as you can. The other items could follow in order, but over a span of a few years. In terms of medium priority, boarding docks at the launch ramp, that should be improved at a cost of about $69,000. Providing wing security gates at the entrance to each of the main docks at the north end. Milo has put a budget of about $45,000. The reason that becomes important is that boats are becoming more and more and more expensive, and boaters are getting more and more concerned about the public being able to get onto the finger docks and the docks and either taking things from the boats or getting onto the boats. And that is not just a problem at this particular marina. That is happening at marinas all over the province of Ontario. We would suggest that consideration be given to installing a webcam service at strategic locations throughout the harbor, which would allow boaters to sort of keep an eye on their boats, and it would allow the harbor master to also keep an eye on things as well. And what that does is it sort of gives the boaters a greater degree of security in terms of feeling that their boat is safe. We didn't put in a budget allowance, but we're suggesting that you should in fact improve the quality of the Wi-Fi service. The last three items under medium priority are additional lighting on docks I, H, and F. I mean, this in a sense would also help with the older boaters. I mean, but by the same token, it's a safety issue, and it should be addressed. Provide security fencing around the winter storage area at the north end of the facility, and we've put a number in there in terms of per meter cost. Improving access to the lake at the north end of the harbor for use for rental and personally owned non-motorized boats is the last item under medium priority. Again, it's getting people involved in boating that will have a positive influence on the harbor and the marina in terms of seasonal and transient boaters. We're suggesting that the items of low priority are replacing the haul-out structure, which has a price tag of about $500,000. The purchase or lease of a mobile travel lift, the number that's there is actually a purchase price, and we've got that as a low priority. And also the purchase or lease of a mast crane is also in our mind a low priority, but there's a budget there. That's actually all I have to say. Milo and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to either the report or what we had to say tonight.
Thank you, Glenn. There is a recommendation. I'll read the recommendation and then we'll take any questions or comments. So the recommendation is that Council receives the 2018 Port Elgin Harbor Strategic Assessment as presented by Glenn Pincombe of Touristics Consulting. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Glenn, for your presentation, and Milo. I have a question about accessibility, because I think you mentioned in your report that adding accessibility features to the docks would be important in terms of bringing in tour boats and tall ships and things like that. 2 years ago, Dave and I went as part of our Economic Development Committee on a tour to Michigan, to West Michigan, to Manistee area in particular. And I don't know if you know about that area, but that area has become a real destination center for accessibility revolving around water recreation. And one of the things that they have in their harbor is a wheelchair lift from the dock for boats. And that area now has become a real destination point for boaters. And so I wondered if you could comment on that. How much would something like that cost? Is that something you'd think that we should be considering, especially when you made your point about the fact that the age of boaters is going to be increasing?
Well, there's no question in my mind. I think it is something that you should give consideration to, and Milo can comment on this more than I can. But my understanding is that if you want to have tour boats and those kinds of things operating out of the marina, you're actually required to do that. Are you not?
Yes, you are. The docks that we're proposing would come very close to meeting the accessibility standards during most water levels. it is quite difficult to actually meet that requirement under the extreme ends of the water levels, extreme high and extreme low. So what we have done on most marinas that we've designed in the last 2 or 3 years is essentially meet that requirement in the range of water levels that occur frequently. So that, and the final decision always rests with the municipality that we design for, the owner of the marina. And most municipalities have a committee that reviews accessibility standards, and we have always taken the designs to that committee and got their concurrence in what we're providing. So the docks that we're proposing and pricing here would have a very high level of accessibility. In terms of a specific access for boaters that are in the wheelchair, that can be done. We have in fact designed similar facility for a marina in Burlington, the La Salle Park Marina, so that can be done. That can be incorporated.
So what are we talking about in terms of cost for something
In terms
like
of cost, the one that we designed in Burlington, I think the budget was, in terms of ramp construction, I'll say about $90,000, and that was several years ago, so it may be marginally more. It really depends on the site-specific condition and the actual, I guess, the loading of the person from the wheelchair into the boat is usually done with the assistance of other boaters. But getting the wheelchair right down to the dock and right next to the boat, that can be designed.
Yes. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's great to see all the data put together. A couple of things that perhaps are more comments or questions for Frank or Jane. A couple of times during the presentation, it was mentioned how the marina or the harbor, however you want to define it for us, it's a business. It's a competitive business, and that word business came up a number of times. And I'm just one of the disappointments I have with the report is it doesn't make the suggestion very obvious that we should really look at this as a business center, and we should create the structure that lets it operate that way. Because in the financial section, there's very limited information about the actual opportunities. Like it says that our marketing budget is a little bit low, and but it's not yet giving us the chance to literally see this as a business and let it run that way. What I'm getting at is that the idea that 10% net on the level of revenue is good. I accept that. However, this particular report doesn't really have a chart-like structure that I would have liked to have seen that would have shown some financial information over a period of time. There is a reference to 2010 to 2015, and if I go back to just before 2010, I believe we were in a little better situation in terms of the return on the investment to the municipality. Things have sort of changed since then, and then you see a situation where there seems to be some potential here, but that potential is also linked to $2.5 million worth of high priority investments to reach an audience of boaters that maybe we're not sort of tapping into in enough a way. But $2.5 million is a big chunk of change, and I guess I know we're being asked tonight to just receive the report. I think it would be a healthy addition to the report to have a little bit more substantive information concerning a period of time associated with revenues, expenses, and that sort of thing. Because I think if you imagine this as a business, we should start to let it run as a business and not have it get mixed up with some other municipal activities, because this isn't a municipal service like some of the other services that we have. And certainly there's a compelling case in here for a number of investments and improvements. But at the same time, there's a lot of big question marks there about big boats and attracting those boats to come here and, all that kind of stuff that I would have liked to have seen a little more emphasis on letting it be developed as a standalone cost center and a business center, because I think that is the real future that we should be embracing. Thank you.
We get Councillor Minaj.
Sorry, Dave. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm amazed. This is one of the most comprehensive reports, including priorities and budget numbers that we've seen, and I'm impressed. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate the validation of a well-run, currently well-run business harbor effort as well. And thank you for validating that. So very quickly, we used to have a sports fishing industry with a lot of charter boats because the salmon were 30 pound big, and then they went all the way down to half that size for various reasons, and they're starting to recover. So you mentioned about charter fishing and boats, and they're smaller. They're not as long. So when you weigh that, when you juggle that against the 40-foot plus larger slips and the larger ships, boats, I couldn't find it, and maybe you could just point it out again. How fast will we eat up the rest of the space in the harbor when we make this conversion? If we're going to take a dock or two and we're going to make them bigger slips available for the bigger ships, and the bigger ships come, how fast do we zero out that we don't have any space left?
Actually, you won't. The plan that Milo put forward, we've actually reduced the number of slips by 8, and in fact, fit all of the new longer slips within that basin, and allow. It's too bad. I said to Milo on the way up here, we should have included a diagram. It's in the report in the presentation tonight. But what it shows is that we've actually moved docks F and I closer to where dock G is now, so that there's a greater amount of space close to the shoreline on the east side for the kind of boating that could take place there, and we've still allowed a sufficient amount of space where the new dock G would be to accommodate those longer slips. So in essence, you are not, in a sense, if you will, filling the marina past its capacity. Am I right in saying that?
Councillor Dave Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for your report. Once again, I was impressed with the level of detail, but I'm a little bit perplexed also with some of the information. I'm a boater myself. I don't want to admit how many boats I actually own, if you count canoes and dinghies, but I also have a 31-foot Sea Ray, and it's a dual engine power boat, and a couple other in between boats. And I'm also on the executive of the Lake Huron Fishing Club, which has about 400 members that are all boat owners, and I've spent a lot of time down at the harbor and with the people that work there, the people that have businesses down there, and I've yet to meet somebody that says, gee, I wish there was space for my 50-foot motor yacht. To me, your information seems to indicate that people are getting into bigger boats. My personal experience is I can't give away my 31-foot boat because nobody, especially younger people, don't want something that gets 1 mile per gallon or less. Younger people who are coming up through the next cohort are faced with global warming and carbon tax and hybrid cars and electric cars, and we're hearing that countries are going to be not building motorized cars anymore. And where are you getting this data from that indicates over the next 20 years people are going to start getting into large motor yachts that get 2 or 3 gallons per mile? I just don't see it myself. And I see people getting into maybe small sailboats, smaller power boats that are economically run. We don't have, in Saugeen Shores, we have a high average income, and people here can afford motorboats and recreational endeavors that are sometimes out of the reach of certain other areas. I agree with that. But we don't have filthy rich people here. People that have 50-foot motor yachts, They live in Toronto, they live in Chicago, they live in Detroit, they live in Windsor. They don't live here. And where are you getting the data that indicates for this area there's going to be a huge demand for giant motor yachts over the next 20 years? You've blown my mind with your data.
Well, it came from two sources, both in terms of Ontario-wide, and that's where the projections came for the number of in sense, boats projections in terms of length, beam, and draft. I mean, we spoke to boat manufacturers in Ontario, Canada, and the United States, but we also spoke to boaters here in the marina, and there were a number of boaters who indicated that they were interested in the future getting a longer boat. And the stats do indicate that there is a market for that. Now, we're not suggesting, again, it's unfortunate we didn't include it. We're not suggesting that you turn all of the slips in the marina into 46-foot slips. In fact, what our recommendation was that 24 of those be in that range, which is is an ambitious but certainly a smaller portion of the number of slips. But certainly based on the information that we've been able to gather, that the projections are that there is an interest in that area. It's an interesting comment that you made about the 31-foot boat that you have, because what we're finding is that in order for these new boats to be able to sell, what they are having to do is to design more and more and more efficient motors and that sort of thing, because there's no question the older boats did burn a lot of fuel. Great joke, a couple of years ago we were doing some work in Oakville, and we went to a meeting one night, and the fellows were sitting around. Most of them were sailboaters, and one of them was a power boater. And the sailboater turned to the power boater and he said, have you had the boat out this year? And he says, no, not yet. And he said to the power boater, I guess it would cost you at least $1,000 to fill that boat up, right? And the fellow said, yes. So you're absolutely right. I mean, with the older boats, there's no question they are extremely expensive to run. But as I said, I mean, the stats that we were able to collect indicate that it's an Ontario-wide, it's an Ohio-wide, it's a Michigan-wide movement in the direction of bigger boats, and there is some interest in this particular market area for those longer slips.
Not efficient in the water.
Yeah, I'm
sure. No boat that I've ever known and no boat that's ever been.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I think we'll move on with the recommendation. Now, thank you very much, Glenn and Marlo. So then you've heard the recommendation. Any further questions? I'll call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That carries. So we will now move to 7.1, which is, just I'll move on here. It's an information report on our drinking water, and our Director of Public Works, Amanda, will present.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. As part of our annual reporting requirements, we're happy to bring to you the 2017 water reports. These reports describe the water system, the expenses incurred, testing performed, and any inspections during 2017. 5 points I would like to make as a summary of the report. The first is that the water system is safe, and the Ministry of the Environment has recognized that. The water system is managed safely and well within compliance. There were no incidents or events in 2017 with water quality exceedances. Aqua has implemented new record-keeping protocols to address the ministry's comments from the inspection and have provided evidence to staff and the ministry that this is being followed. I'd like to highlight that the performance rating on the inspection from 2016 to 2017 increased by 6. We continue to work confidently with Aqua as a team to provide the citizens of this town with safe and efficient drinking water. And with that, I would like to invite Aqua staff members Karen Laurente and Richard Junkin to make the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, Council, staff, members of the public. So I'm here to let you know about the results for this year's MOE inspection report. I'd just like to cover that an inspection rating that is less than 100% does not mean that the drinking water from the system is unsafe. The primary goal of this assessment are to encourage ongoing improvement of the drinking water system and to measure this progress from year to year. So it's a plan, do, check, improve. And this is directly from the MOECC cover letter that's always attached to the report every year. So this is the inspection summary rating record. So we ended up with a final inspection rating of 96.15%, which means we have an inspection risk rating of 3.85%. So each of these are the inspection modules that they go through, and then the compliance rating for each on the side. So the logbooks and the treatment process monitoring were a couple of the questions that they had. So this is a chart that shows 2015 and 2016 and 2017 and what the inspection ratings were, the inspection risk rating, the number of non-compliances, the type of inspection, and the percentage change from the previous year. So in 2015, there was 100%, and in 2016, it went down to 89.95%. So we went down by 10.05%, and in 2017, we went to 96.15%. So we increased by 6.2%. So the first non-compliance was for the 72-hour checks and not documenting enough information. So one of the things that the inspector had said was that the operators have a daily SCADA report that they look at that shows all of the numbers from the system. And some of the readings, hit and miss throughout the year, might be a zero. There might be a reason for that zero. It might be a power blip. There could be different rationales for that, but what they're supposed to do is, and they do it, but they weren't writing it in the logbook. So that's where he told us we have to write it in the logbook. So they see the zero on the daily SCADA report, and they're supposed to go into the trending and check the trending and see if there was any problem, because the trending gives a much longer time frame to see what happened, but there was no power blip or anything that happened during that time. All of the trending showed that everything was okay, so they didn't write it in the logbook because they didn't find a problem. So that has been corrected. So the logbooks, not consistently documenting information. So we had additional logbook training, and they had training in 2016 and 17, and we're going to be doing some more specifically on Reg 128. Sorry, I'm just trying to find where he said what the actual problem was there. So February 1st, our compliance team is now on a daily basis reviewing the logbooks. So from the previous days, the operators will take a photograph of the logbook, send it to the operations staff compliance team. They look at the logbook entry, they compare it to the daily SCADA report, they compare it to the work orders in Maximo, and they compare it to the timesheets to ensure that any changes from regular norm are actually being consistently entered into the logbooks. And that report also, at the end of the month, is sent to the MOECC inspector so that he can take a look to ensure that we are doing exactly what it is that he is wanting us to do. So the maintaining of records, What happened was there was an issue at the water plant on the one day, and the senior operations manager was there, and we needed to figure out filling out a CT calculation to ensure that we were meeting the log removal. The manager filled out the form with the operators, and he wanted to take it back to the office to update it and to provide more information, and we had an email from the senior operations manager the very next day sending out to the operators what the new form looked like and how to fill it out. But he forgot to take that piece of paper and take it back to the water plant because that's where it has to be stored. So we had it, but we didn't have it until January 25th, which was after the inspection period had concluded. And the MOE officer did write that in the MOE inspection report. And the same thing is with number 4, because our log was not available for at least the 5 years that they require us to keep it. We actually have 15 years that we have to keep it, but we just didn't have it at the plant at that time. Questions?
Okay. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for coming in and giving us that sort of rundown of those issues. The one thing that, in reading the detailed report, when the ministry talks about the non-compliance, the 4 non-compliance incidents, in the first 2, they mention the first line is for the 3rd consecutive inspection. We have these problems. It's kind of weird. There's kind of a weird incongruency there because when you reported just there, 2015 shows 0 non-compliances. 16 has 7, 17 has 4. So I can only anticipate that the ministry in year 1 of that 3 that they're referring here didn't actually call them non-compliances and only decided that they were non-compliances in year 2, although retroactively they're going back and calling them, saying it's 3 years, which is
yes. So in the body of the document of the first inspection, 2015, they actually identified it in the body of the document as opposed to a non-compliance. So normally they would, if it's in the body of the document, like even in 2015, they would have made it a suggestion or a best practices recommendation. So normally what happens is you get a best practice recommendation. If you don't follow that, it ends up on the inspection report the following year. In this case, for whatever reason, even though it was the same inspector on all 3 inspections, it didn't end up as a recommended action.
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I guess, so 1 year, so it wasn't always a non-compliance though. Like it became a non-compliance partway through. I guess the question I have is, I mean, the Act I don't think has changed, or maybe it has in that time. But are we? Is it in any? Is the problems that we're having here with logging, were they ever in any way in violation of the Act? In your view, like, I mean, because if it was in violation of the Act in 2015, surely they would have called it a non-compliant. It's very confusing, and I'm wondering if the confusion is MOECC behavioral change, or is there some actual change, or some reality that we should be concerned about, I guess, is what I'm trying to, in a very muddled way, drill down to.
And I would say that we see trends as an industry and as Aqua specifically, where for whatever reason the inspection protocol, it doesn't change. You're right. The legislation hasn't changed. Reg 170 is still Reg 170, but depending on the inspector or the cycle or whatever happens to be high on the radar, and it's probably a reaction to what's happening in the industry, I would say. And the inspectors have, they inspect facilities every year, and what they may not catch or they may not catch the first 2 or 3 years may become higher profile in the 3rd year, and it might be because things have been cleaned up so much in the industry, and I would suggest that they have since Walker, and things have really been cleaned up. So the inspections have gone from being what they were at the start, which was very high level, to being very, very detailed now. So their focus does change, and I don't know that the ministry sits and has a discussion about, these are high priority things for this year. Please take a hard look at those. But as an industry, we do see that. So it trends across Aqua in the industry that if we're getting a lot of logbook stuff, it's probably not just here. It's probably in other places as well. And that kind of did happen across the agency as well. So,
one more thing, Mr. Mayor, if I may say, obviously we would like to see those things solved next year, and I'm sure you're working on that. But I expect that next year the inspector will find some different things, and that 100% will be elusive. And that's the nature of these inspections, in my experience, is that the more you're inspected, the more tempting it is to find new things wrong with what you're doing. So I think I would just like to say that I obviously respect the opinion of the Director of Public Works and your work, and we have heard that the operation is safe and the drinking water has been safe, and we anticipate and expect you'll continue that trend and keep working through these inspections year after year. And but I just wanted to make my comment that I'm confident, based on what I've heard and what I've read, in the safety of the drinking water system and in the competence of your work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask you a definition question. What's the difference between a focused inspection and a detailed inspection?
A focused inspection is broad, where a detailed inspection, they'll get, in this case, they went through every day of the logbook, every page of the logbook, so they dig much more down into the weeds in a detailed inspection as opposed to a focused inspection. And I would suggest that the detailed inspection back-to-back years was a direct result of what happened the year before.
Councillor Menard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a number of comments and then about 7 questions I would like to ask at the end of my comments. So in 2015, 100% compliance, I understand that, and I understand that it wasn't as detailed an inspection. In 2016, it surfaced that there was a non-qualified person, and that was deemed to be a particularly high level of concern, and it was passed on to the investigative enforcement branch of the MOECC. So they took a different opinion about how serious that was, and we had lots of debate back in the day, 2016, and I made an error and moved on. However, between 2016 and today, I'm not completely in favor with the Deputy Mayor's read on it, on confidence. There are a number of other administrative findings which have warranted, we've seen those same slides before, that logging wasn't completed properly in 2016, and that the recommendation was to do some training, e-training, and to have a chat about what the reg says. There are 6 items in the Ontario Regulation Safe Drinking Water Act, Section 27. There are 6 items that you and I can read that includes putting your name on the log and the date and the time of, and then things that happen normally and abnormally, things that you do. And you know what? Then I read the regulator's words. I don't think he's too happy. I believe this is his attempt to change the attitudes, behaviors, and a cultural problem that he sees existing here. He states again, and I'll repeat it, it's already been stated, this is the 3rd consecutive inspection. The operators are still not consistently doing what they're required to do. There was another question about, is it in the Act that they have to do this? It says you must do it. It is in the Act. Shall is equal to must in any legal environment. You know that I know a little bit more about some of this stuff than everybody else in the room, and I know, Mr. Mayor, that you and I have both been on the training end, so we understand whether or not training is effective and whether it can change things. But a procedural compliance request says you must do it. So he is so unhappy that his name is Shane Finley, I believe, and he is so upset that he is mandating monthly reviews until further notice. So that is another level of detail that he is requesting to make sure things change. So I get to the end of my comments. In my opinion, these requirements listed on Schedule 22, Summary Report, page 2 of 5, Item 2, are not difficult to complete, and there is now a recommendation from Aqua to have a second round of training a second reminder put into the log, and a second group chat with supervisors and managers as to what the operator's responsibilities are. It's easy to do. They've been asked 3 times to follow the correct procedure, and it's still not happening. So what's next? So now my questions. But before I go to my questions, I'll remind myself and anybody that wants to listen to me that Justice Dennis O'Connor said, we, the members of council, have a duty, or we'll be facing fines or imprisonment. We should be vigilant against complacency and don't ever assume all is well under our care and direction. And finally, we should be informed. We should be asking questions, getting the answers and advice from experts, and then we should make good decisions and act prudently. So to my questions. 3 questions for Aqua. 1, can you please explain why this is the 3rd repeat finding of the same lack of procedural compliance noted by the regulator? 2, can you please explain why the supervisors and managers did not know about or find these same deficiencies and correct them prior to the regulator's inspection? 3, do you take steps with staff that do not follow procedures? And then I have 3 questions, Mr. Mayor, for Amanda and David, and then I have 1 for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I think in honesty, in fairness, I mean, you've popped these questions to these people here, and I suspect that they would like to prepare some other longer answers. And I think if you want to generally speak to it, but I think if you want specific answers, Neil, can you just give those questions to Amanda, and we'll have Aqua respond?
I will, but can I still go through the questions?
Sure. But do you want to speak to those, or would you sooner deal with them?
No, but I can say generally that, if I might, that you're right. 97% isn't. We're not happy with that. In fact, we're always striving for 100%, and fully 80% of Aqua's facilities do meet the 100%. It's, I sat here last year at this time and said, I don't want to be back here again this year at this time doing this, and I take it personally that I am. So, all I can say is that it was a very detailed inspection, and there are 500 odd entries that go in every year, and there was an instance, or at least one day, and more than one, where our operations staff, and we failed. We did not meet the requirement of the reg, as you said, and you're right. It's a regulation. It's not a do it if you want to. It's a must do. There is some subjectivity there in that one inspector might not see what another inspector sees, and writing down, we took chlorine residuals, everything was fine, might be good enough for one person, and it might not be good enough for another. And again, I'm not saying that's what happened here. These are failures, and Aqua recognizes that, and we certainly take ownership. And we are, again, we're striving towards 100%. We've had it. This group proves that it can do 100%. And I think we've got measures in place, although at this point it's lip service, because that's exactly what we said last year. Yes, there has been. Going from 90 whatever, or 89 to 96 is a very big improvement. The average improvement for a system that is meeting less than 100% is less than 1%, but again, it's never going to be enough until we get to 100. So, that's the answer, a general answer to your question, but no, we're not satisfied, and you're right, we didn't do everything we ought to have to make sure that didn't happen.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Neil.
Well,
Was that other questions?
Just a quick follow-up then. I think you answered the first 2 questions quite well, but maybe I could ask that a written reply to these questions come back through Amanda at some time when you've had a chance to look at them.
Certainly.
But one of them was, are we taking any steps with the staff that don't follow procedures?
Yeah, the third question speaks to discipline, and it's important that we respect the fact that these are unionized staff, and there are procedures that we have to follow, and confidentiality is certainly one of them.
Fair enough. That's fair.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to know that you have a process. And so my 3 thank you. So my 3 questions for David and Amanda is, number 1, do they agree that operator logging should be able to meet a 100% compliance audit standard? And I don't need you to answer it right now. You can. How many inspections did either of the 2 of you take in the past year related to these deficiencies and findings? How many inspections did Amanda and David take? So the third question is based around the fact that in October 23rd, 2017, the town, you stated position, the town is confident that this performance improvement will continue. And that's exactly how I felt. My confidence with your confidence was with Aqua's confidence that we were improving. And in February 12th, 2018, the staff report recommending a further one-year extension, you stated, it is again worth noting that our staff in Saugeen Shores have the utmost trust in the abilities and the dedication of the local operators and feel that their proven high level of performance is an asset to the town and Aqua. I note that you didn't make any statement written tonight, but you did again say it, Amanda, that tonight you still feel the same way. So if we ultimately keep Aqua, their management and their operators, would you be willing to conduct parallel inspections and document your findings with us here at Council? Is my third question. And my final question, if you want to all of us on Council, in order to have an option available prior to the December 31st, 2018 deadline for a contract renewal, will my peers join me to request staff investigate other suppliers of the same service requirements? And one of the reasons I ask is that, timely or not, the American Water Company of Canada has provided, in my mail, I don't know if it's provided in everybody's mail, an opportunity to talk to them about providing a similar and same service. So I'm asking, will you, Council, work with me, and I will come back with a motion if you tell me offline then that we should ask staff to investigate other suppliers of the same service. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can get some answers. Councillor Mike Myatt.
Mr. Mayor, just wondering, could staff or Aqua remind me how many years Aqua has been providing service to the municipality of Town of Saugeen Shores? Prior to that, Southampton, Port Elgin, how many years providing that service?
It varies. You can probably, do you know that?
We consider it to be a legacy client, so yeah. I think we've been here since MOE, Aqua's been here, so this is our 25th anniversary.
25th. Do you know how many years of those 25 years, I know this is a hard question, you won't have this at your fingertips, but where you reached 100% compliant over those 25 years?
Well, the inspections only got a rating since Walkerton and even since then.
15
but
years.
I don't know that off the top of my head other than to say that it's probably pretty good.
I'm going to take a little different direction here, sure. And I just wanted to say, Mr. Mayor, I've had some personal experiences with Aqua staff where I've actually contacted Aqua staff on a Saturday night via email and got a response back in about a half an hour from that email, and I've had staff down at my household upon request in writing with water turn-off, shut-offs, et cetera, I just wanted to compliment our Aqua operators inside out. I think there's a whole lot of good stuff happening here too, and I know you're not happy with the non-compliance, and you know, as our deputy mayor said, you know, being awarded 100% compliance probably is elusive, and maybe it will be, but I know you're always striving towards 100%, and I happen to believe that you will get there. So I think the message is the people in Saugeen Shores have safe drinking water, and yes, there's been some issues. You're not happy with it, and I've heard around the table there's some uneasiness too. But I just want to throw out a compliment too to you and your staff. I think that you are doing your very best. Obviously, the very best hasn't been quite good enough, and we're dealing with safe drinking water. It's a serious matter. So I don't want to water this down with flattery, but water it down with flattery. But I just wanted to say that I do appreciate all the good things you do.
Thank you. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a specific question about your report, and it's talking about the quiz as the follow-up of the training session. looking for the page 14 maybe. This was a recommendation as part of the standard operating procedure. So it recommends a quiz for the staff at the end of the training session to evaluate staff awareness and understanding of the requirements of the Act. And it says for any staff who achieves less than 70% on the quiz, one-on-one training will be provided by the compliance team. So what is the follow-up of the one-on-one training to determine that that's successful? I have written down in my notes, page 14, it's the recommendation, under the recommendation that the owner and operator create a standard operating procedure to help address the issues of the
I think this is from the action plan that we provided to the ministry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good too.
Yeah, so we provided to the ministry that our compliance team would do further logbook training with them, but just instead of just doing the training with them, would have a quiz at the end of it where they would have to show that they were retaining.
Okay, that's good, but my question then is follow-up, because it says if a staff member achieves less than 70%, one-on-one training will be provided. And so what I wanted to determine is what's the assessment for the one-on-one training to ensure that that has done the trick?
So as per what the recommendation was, it's suggesting that if anyone achieves less than 70% on the quiz, that they would receive one-on-one training. So anything higher than 70%, if each of the staff got higher than 70%, they wouldn't be required to do one-on-one training, which falls in line with OA, or CEU training. So at the end of any training that we have, there's a requirement to have some kind of a test to make sure that people are actually retaining knowledge instead of it just being a seminar. So I would suggest in this case that they got higher than 70%, and it would surprise me if they didn't, to be completely honest, and as a result there was no follow-up to that.
Okay, but I guess I'm not expressing myself clearly. Obviously, what I'm asking about is, let's say hypothetically we have somebody who has to have the one-on-one training.
Okay.
How do we assess to make sure that that one-on-one training has taken?
I guess, and again, I shouldn't be guessing here, but it would be an assessment by generally the senior operations staff, who are the staff member who supervise operations staff, frontline operations staff. Not generally, they always come from an operations background. So the senior operations manager in charge of this system has a lot of years and experience in water and wastewater. So I would suggest that if one of his staff wasn't able to, if he'd taken the test, and even if he'd taken the test and we saw there was a gap there, that manager should be able to, based on his experience and knowledge, identify any remaining gaps. And in that case, tailor training that would fill that gap.
Would there be a retake of that quiz?
Well, see, what happened, the certification process itself lends itself to saying whether an operator's, and the certification exams have changed dramatically since Walker and again. So as certification requirements go along, you upgrade your certificates. There's a test as well as CEUs and mandated minimum 40 hours of training annually. So that intimates in itself that that's how an operator becomes certified, and that's how you get a class 1, 2, 3, up to 4 level certification. So by virtue of that alone, as long as it's, and that's the problem we ran into previously, by virtue of having that license, it indicates that you should be able to meet what we need in terms of knowledge to fill out logbooks, etc. And again, acknowledging that there are gaps, and that this was one of those.
Well, as you know, as we all know, this is a zero tolerance situation.
Absolutely. Yep.
For our community and for us, and so 70%.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I agree. It's not a high threshold, other than to say
comforting.
No. The exams, certification exams, class 1 to 4 are also 70%. So it coincides. It coincides with that.
Are you able as an agency to increase that standard to a higher level than 70%?
Yes.
Oh yes, sure. We can
Would
share
you
our
consider
training.
doing
Our
that?
internal training can be customized to do that. Certainly, logbook training is going to be again a focus, and Aqua has across the agency different levels of specialized staff that can help and be brought in. We've neighboring hubs have former MOE inspectors, as we've mentioned before, that we can access that can help and are willing to help. So that's certainly something that we are more than willing and probably will do as a result of this.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you very much for the information report, and thank you, Amanda. Is there anything you want to add? You don't have to. I didn't want to put you on the spot. If there's anything you'd like to add, please go ahead.
I will respond to Councillor Menage's
Questions? Sure.
But I just wanted to say that when we talk about inspections, I'm not qualified to inspect. I don't have any of the training. So we work diligently with Aqua I meet with them quarterly. Adam meets with them bi-weekly formally and weekly informally to make sure that these are going on. Aqua continues to give us evidence of the change in the system, getting the photographs of the logbooks themselves as well. So when you see my response back, I just wanted to verbally explain that. We can't perform an inspection. I don't have the knowledge, the qualifications, and my informal observations wouldn't be helpful at this stage.
Okay.
Moving forward, we will continue with.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and thank you again for this evening. Thank you for keeping us up to date. So we'll return now to the regular order of agenda. So we'll go back up to general government. It's a report of municipal officers at 5.2. It's a general government report. It's a staff report on the multi-year accessibility plan, and our Deputy Clerk Tracy is going to present.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me. It's interesting sitting on this side of the table. As you know, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which I'll refer to as the AODA, was enacted in 2005. The goal at the time was to have a fully accessible Ontario by 2025. So, of course, that date is still looming. It's getting closer and closer. Part of the AODA, there was a requirement to have the multi-year accessibility plan. So this plan was developed for municipalities to get a handle on the facilities that they had and how we can make them compliant to the 2025 deadline. In January of 2013, we did pass our first 5-year plan, which we worked with staff over the years, and we really knocked down a lot of the items on there. So when we were developing this new plan, we basically followed the same format. Members of the Accessibility Committee, so they are volunteers, inspected the facilities, basically using their common general knowledge on accessible principles. They identified barriers that they could visually see at the time of the inspection. As you can appreciate, we started these inspections in 2016. We worked diligently, but when you're dealing with timeframes, staff, and volunteers, it does take a few years to get through all of the buildings, so which we have done successfully. So as we're working through them, as we're developing the plan, we noticed that there was some items that have already been completed. So each year we will review the plan and we will update it of projects that we have completed. Some of them we know for sure have been completed. The Chantry View washroom is one instance where it has been renovated, so a re-inspection is scheduled for 2018. It is recognized that the built environment is not fully adopted yet. The building code is basically the law when it comes to the buildings. So some of our suggestions are just suggestions. So one of the examples I have for you is the building code requires that universal washroom be able to accommodate an adult change table. There's no requirement that it actually be installed. So we know this is coming. the committee would like to suggest that one adult change table be installed. It's not realistic to expect all 17, or I'm not sure if that's the exact number of washrooms we have in Saugeen Shores, have an adult change table, but we would like to see a minimum one in each town, in each municipality or former town. Another thing that is a suggestion that has been coming up lately is a scooter charging station. So this is something our committee has identified as a need in Saugeen Shores based on our demographics, based on our beautiful trails that people are out and about. They're traveling. So it has been a concern that has been brought forth to the committee. So it is something that we are looking to try to have in the near future. So again, it's not in the building code, but it is something that we feel is needed in Saugeen Shores. So you may see, we may offer that suggestion, but it is a suggestion at this time. So one of the new schedule on our accessibility plan that we added from, that's different from the last one, is the parks. So the Act does require that all new parks, trails, beach points, outdoor public spaces, playgrounds, and exterior paths of travel and accessible parking all be made accessible. So we have added a component of the parks. They will be inspected annually. They're very brief at this point. The majority is handicap parking, as you'll notice. That's consistent concrete, or not concrete, but hard path surface to get from the accessible parking to the facility. So it's one thing to have an accessible facility, but you need to be able to get to it. So it's just sort of things that we're looking at when we're looking at a park. Playgrounds are another thing. You may have a beautiful little playground there, and when the time comes and budgets allow, we'd like to see an accessible portion added to it. So this plan is a commitment from our accessibility committee, and we're trying to show our commitment to have accessible municipal buildings. A lot of these items will be, hopefully, we'll look at over the next, well, 2025 is actually 7 years away. So we're looking at trying to bite off in small components of 1 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, and 5 to 7 years. So some of the smaller ticket items we've put down as a 1 to 2 year. So we're hoping that those can be looked at through sort of the general operating budget. A signage strategy is one thing that we're hoping to work on this year, which will alleviate a lot of the concerns that we had. And of course, all these renovations will be based on budgets. We will work closely with community services staff so that the plans and our ideas are brought forward each year. Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy. So the recommendation is that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts a multi-year accessibility plan. Any questions, comments? Councillor Mike Wyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just wanted to thank you, Tracy, to you and your committee. This is an excellent report, and you put a whole lot of effort into it, and I just want to say thank you. And on page 11 of 32, I see 21 projects for 2018, and I see, I think, Jane, if I get through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jane and Tracy, I see a fair number of those, Jane, are under community services. I expect probably 75% of them, by the looks of it, I think, are under community services. So it's a healthy list and long list. And is it reasonable to expect that you're able to bite all these off in 2018? Do you think we're going to see a lot of completion to this list by year end?
Yes, certainly looking at the list can be somewhat overwhelming, so we've pooled it to make it a little bit more accessible for us over the next 2 years. And when I talk about pooling, we've broken it down to what 1 year, 2 year looks like. The next 2 years are certainly achievable within our operating budget, and we'll be focusing on signage, as Tracy indicated, and working closely with Public Works when we look at accessible parking, signs on the road. So those are regulatory signs that we need to be cognizant of, but as well as coming up with a signage strategy on our facilities with our washroom facilities. So we're working closely on that, and our goal is to have that done by the end of the year. And so that's a large component of the next 2 years is signage in itself, and we'll be working closely also with the parking bylaw.
So for me, Mr. Mayor, so Jane, when I see things like extend the promenade at the Port Elgin Main Beach and things like Pearson Park washroom, barrier free entrance, those sorts of things, and front counter reconfiguration. So you're taking some of these projects and moving them into 2019. Is that the idea?
Yeah, some of them we're getting done this year.
Yeah.
2018 signage will be done for the most part. Some of those items that you've identified is already on our capital list, which has been approved moving forward. And again, we look at items such as what is recommended versus what is required. And obviously the items that are required are priority for us and recommendations fall secondly.
Okay, and Chantry View, just earlier today we discussed that there was a grant. It shows it incomplete in the report, but Chantry View washroom, just so I'm clear, we received a grant for that one, and it is complete, correct?
Correct.
In the report, it maybe doesn't indicate that, but it is complete.
It is complete.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the report, Tracy. I guess I just wanted to be real clear about the list of projects here. Are the projects that are listed here 1 to 7 years for completion, do we need to finish all of them to be AODA compliant, or do some of them go to the AODA and some of them, like you talked about change tables, for example, we one that isn't right now, at least in any regulation. So I guess those are ones that would today be not in regulation. I guess what I'm wondering is there a list somewhere, or maybe this is the list of things that absolutely must be done to be legislatively compliant? Because obviously those are the ones that we're going to have to do right away. We've got to get those done in the next 7 years. And then others are important to do, but maybe don't get us to aren't absolutely, aren't legislated or necessary to do by law. Is there a differentiation in here between those things, or is there a differentiation somewhere?
This is looking at having everything done by 2025. That date, I've been trying to get confirmation that we are still working towards a fully accessible Ontario by 2025, and they're not 100% sure if it's going to roll out. But definitely any new renovations, any new buildings that we do, any remodels that we do, they do need to be accessible. Parks and the same.
I guess if I could just follow Mr. Mayor, I guess because it's concerning to me because like there's facilities in here like the Port Elgin Library, for example, that were done since well after the AODA was in place. We knew most of this stuff at that time. It was only a few years ago, and there's quite a long list of things in here that have been identified to be done, and that's not the only one. Facilities where we've spent millions, right? Recently, the Plex, which was maybe just before the AODA, I guess, so maybe it doesn't qualify, but I guess I just wondered, like, can we call a building like the library AODA compliant? Like, can we say it's compliant with the law today, and we're focused on the areas where we're absolutely not compliant and get those done, and come back to the library after 2025 to make it better? I mean, we can always be better. Even the AODA is just a baseline, right? And we should always be doing this and doing it better and more, and aiming to be above the minimum. But for the next 7 years, we better get up to compliance, or aim for it. So I guess maybe there isn't an answer right now, but I would really like to see back from somewhere the list of things that we need to do in these facilities to hit compliance, as far as we know, by 2025, and the other things that are maybe not, that could be put off to the end to make sure we get there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So the building code is, So the building code is, ultimately the guideline. I mean, when that facility was built, it met the building code at the time. The building code has changed, and it will continue to change. So I think, as long as we build within the building code and respect the accessibility committee's wishes, I think we'll be in good shape.
That's so the point that, so this is going to help me understand the ODA then. When we talk about a fully accessible Ontario, we're only talking about new things, right? We're like the things that already exist are not included in that. So it's fully accessible going forward with new things we're building, new building permits that we let, but we're not, at this moment, by law, we don't have to revisit anything we've already built. Is that your understanding of what the law is right now?
Well, the multi-year accessibility plan is designed for you to plan for that deadline, to plan for the future.
Sure.
And that's the guide that we're given.
Thank you.
Vice Stephanie, are you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question. There's a number of times, and this is probably an Amanda question. There's a number of times where accessible parking is mentioned. Is an accessible parking situation, is it simply a matter of a change in the size of the stall and signage? Is that's what makes a space accessible generally, right?
Through predominantly, yes. You also need to not have a lip on the curb to get out of the spot to where you're going.
Okay. Will parking either be picked up in the transportation master plan exercise, or is the parking bylaw up for review soon?
And through you, no to either of those at this time. I think the parking lot, when it goes to be renewed, that's when this needs to come into place.
So I sort of saw them as low-hanging fruit. All this accessible parking that's mentioned, it's not in the short-term horizon that the parking bylaw is going to pick up on some of that stuff. Is that fair?
It's more the opposite, that when we go to implement these, we'll update the bylaw to include them.
My other question was, it would be interesting, and I know it's outside of budget time, but it would be interesting to start to see a little bit of costing sometimes in terms of, what these accessible parking spaces. Sometimes it's just paint and widening a spot, but like to know what signs cost and that kind of thing. The one comment that kind of caught me in the report, and I would like to somehow imagine that we encourage the accessibility committee to change the report. It's a little troublesome to me that the entry to Fairy Lake, that the response to accessibility is to say, here's a sign, the real accessible entrance is way over off of Lakeview through Matheson Park. That seems, it's a reality, I guess, but it seems a little unrealistic because that is the main entrance for most people to Fairy Lake. So I guess I would rather that we think of how can we somehow do something at the entrance to make it better, because I don't think the solution is to tell people that they have to go a block and a half a block and a half a block around, for that, because they're going in that way, because it's the closest to all the other things that tend to lead them in that direction. So I just would appreciate if maybe you gave that one a second look and thought about what would work there as a recommendation, rather the solution being a sign that says go over there for it. Thank you.
Councilman Minaj.
No surprise to Amanda that I'll bring this up, but I believe that some of the Port Elgin downtown businesses are, in particular one like PharmaSave, is suffering from a lack of easy access to their store, accessible parking, in particular because we beautified some corners and then took away parking spots with left turn lanes. So we've driven most of the accessible parking spots away from a pharmacy that where they're absolutely needed. So I facetiously said to you, Amanda, at one point, it's time to turn all of the parking spots in the downtown core of Port Elgin into accessible. Now that could be accessible, and we have another standard. We have mothers with young children standard that I don't know that we're taking beyond private industry, and maybe we should be. So there are accessible spots, parking spots that do need those cut curbs, and we're not doing it right. So at some point, I know you're working together, Tracy, with Jane and Amanda, but I feel like we're still missing some key elements of how that parking issue is manifesting itself on the two main blocks. Downtown Port Elgin, there are very limited access to banks, access to our pharmacy, and more. So maybe we reverse something. Maybe we take out a piece of beautification and we say, or maybe we take out a left turn left turn lane concept, and I know that's counterproductive to what you wanted to do, but if it means that some of these businesses that are maybe losing business and are going to be coming to you soon saying, hey, the parking spots are not there for my customers, and we need those handicapped or accessible, I should use the right word, accessible parking spots. Maybe we need to address that, and maybe I would like to think that you are. Thank you.
Any further questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any, that's carried. So the next item on the agenda is Environmental Services and Transportation Report, staff report, and it has to do with the Chantry View Drive reconstruction, and I believe Amanda, our Director of Public Works, is going to present.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. My report goes on to describe a lot of what we were considering when it came to Chantry View. I just wanted to highlight the concerns that were received during the public consultation process for this project. One was to maintain the character of the neighborhood. Another was to install sidewalks that are wider than the standard to allow for passage of strollers, bicycles with small children, and adults coming to and going from the beach. Wider driving corridors are seen to increase the speed of vehicles. Connecting a sidewalk from Grosvenor to the bathrooms and to the beach boardwalk is desirable. And that many cyclists use Chantry View Drive as a connection to the tennis club. Many of these cyclists are young and inexperienced, and bicycle safety should be incorporated. From our analysis of the four options, the first being do nothing, the second being what we submitted in August to the residents, third and fourth are very similar, except the fourth has painted bike lanes. We would like to move forward with the detailed design of option number 4. We prefer option number 4 because it includes a narrow asphalt width, which helps to maintain the character as desired by the residents. It has painted bike lanes, which helps increase the visibility of cyclists. It has a concrete sidewalk that is 1.8 meters wide instead of 1.5, which allows for easier passage of 2 people each way. And we wanted to also incorporate parking. So by doing the painted bike lanes with a mountable curb, we can allow boulevard parking on the south side of the road, which would be on the grass. These are done in other cities, and it would be similar to what we see on Market Street, but instead of being paved in this neighborhood, we would have it as a grassed on the road right-of-way for parking. The project will allow us to incorporate additional drainage elements, which is another local residents' concern of the street. If we get your approval today for option 4, our next steps will include the detailed design and preparation of construction drawings, preparation of tender documents, and an engineer's estimate. At this time, we will have a better idea as to the cost, and then we will proceed with tendering the project. Depending on the tendered value, staff will bring back to council final approval of the project prior to construction.
Thank you, Amanda. Then the recommendation is the council approve option number 4 for construction in the spring of 2018. Questions, comments? Start with Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So, Amanda, even with this tight timeline, you plan to have this completed before the summer season begins?
For you, that's our intention. We would like to have this tendered, so design tendered, opened in April with award in May.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just a little confused, Amanda, about the bike lane aspect and the parking. You drew the notion that, in your comments just there, that by putting the bike lanes in on either side of the road, that enables you to have boulevard parking on the south side. And perhaps I'm not understanding. I don't know how those two things, how one enables you to do the other.
Sorry, when either option 3 or 4, we can have the boulevard parking. What I see as a risk of option 3 is that if we don't paint the bike lane, people will still park on the asphalt because that's what people around here are used to doing. So if we paint the bike lines and put the signs up that say boulevard parking, people will see the paint on the road and recognize that they shouldn't be parking in a bike lane. That would be typical. So then that would help them think and look for the sign and be able to park on the boulevard. Whereas if we didn't have those, I think people will still continue to park on the asphalt even though the parking is on the boulevard.
One further question. So there's lots of space then in there on the boulevard to get completely off the bike lane on the south side. We're not going to have a situation where by putting those bike lanes in, I mean, it's a pretty narrow street, right? It's only 7 meters in completed construction. So where, in spite of your best intentions there, where we constantly have blocked bike lanes and enforcement issues in that area. That's the concern for me for bike lanes, is that the way you're hoping it works out doesn't quite work out, and we have cars half on those bike lanes and half on the boulevard, and we have to send bylaw enforcement there all the time and ticket a bunch of people, and it takes a lot of time and resources away that we could be spending otherwise. But so there's lots of room for people to get off and totally out of those bike lanes, and you're confident that's going to work.
There's a room for sure in the boulevard to be able to pull it up so that your car would be fully off the asphalt. I'm not going to say I think that it's going to work 100%, that there will be a learning curve for sure. In all alternatives, there will be parking restrictions. So even in the existing situation, we need to look at the parking in that area because we don't have the width for safely passage of fire trucks. So with the 6.5 meter asphalt that's there today, we will have to be restricting parking.
Thank you.
Councillor Grace, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some comments, but first I have a couple of questions. One of them is that I wondered about, I had a question from a resident for Amanda. I had a question from a resident who wondered about whether the plans included any additional catch basins for stormwater west of Knowles Lane.
Yes, it does. We were looking at doing catch basins at the Lake Street intersection for all the design elements.
Okay, great. My other question is about the transportation master plan, and your report on October 23rd indicated that, about the transportation master plan for this year, indicated that $100,000 would be taken from development charges, and then $25,000 of the funding from the Canadian municipalities would be proposed for the cycling and active transportation portion of the plan, and your report indicated that that $25,000 was provisional. Do you know yet if that has been approved?
We've been working with Lisa on how to implement this, and so she's working with us, putting that piece into the transportation master plan.
So would the amount, would the amount be 125?
That's correct.
Okay. Whether we get funding through the grant or not?
No, we were successful with the grant with Lisa.
Okay, great. Okay. So that's 125. Okay. So I guess my comments are then, I very much appreciate your efforts, Amanda and your staff, to make changes to the original plan that was presented last August. And I believe you made changes and listened to resident input, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate the recommendation for an asphalt width of 7.0 meters, which I think is a feature that's important to maintain safety and which will help deter speeding automobiles and will help preserve the character of the area. But I will not be voting in favor of this recommendation or any changes at this time for the following reasons. We approved funding for a transportation master plan in this year's budget, and Amanda identified in her report last fall various resident concerns to support the need for a transportation master plan, which I agree with. Perceived occurrences of speeding, a need for traffic calming measures, inappropriate speed limits, preserving the character of sections of the town, and the impact of road design on all of those features. In that report, our Director of Public Works also identified the following matters that would be addressed in a transportation master plan study: the impact of development on local streets, collector streets, and arterials, cycling routes to be identified, consistent parking policy for roads, the use of municipal lanes, and cross-section design options for urban and rural roads, including the makeup of the roads, the pavement width, parking, sidewalks, and fire routes. So we are we have approved the spending of $125,000 on a transportation master plan combined with the active transportation and cycling portion. We also approved in 2017, which we are going to be rolling out this year, $80,000 for the stormwater master plan, but it is yet to be completed. And stormwater is an important component of the Chantry View design. So I believe that if we proceed with this reconstruction in the spring, the changes will be done without the benefit of the learnings that we would gain through the completion of these two very important master plans. Deferring the Chantry View plan will allow future designs to consider stormwater management, green infrastructure recommendations that will come out of the stormwater master plan. This street is an important route to our waterfront and to the Southampton Tennis Club, as Amanda has recognized. It's a very important and busy part of Southampton in the summer. I believe that deferring this project will allow for a thorough study of how Chantry View, with the proposed bike lanes, should be integrated into our overall Southampton street plan and active transportation. Now, somebody might say, well, we have funding. It was approved in 2017. It must be spent now. But Amanda confirmed for me last fall in a discussion that the proposed funding of $180,000 for this project is from grants and gas tax and can be reserved for future and or alternative use until at least 2020. So I, once again, really appreciate your efforts. I appreciate your efforts of your staff, your flexibility, but respectfully, I believe the most fiscally responsible way to proceed is to integrate Chantry View into our transportation master plan studies. And this is also a master plan which features prominently in our proposed official plan review report, which is included in tonight's agenda as well. Deferring this reconstruction until the master plan recommendations are completed will ensure that we're spending that $180,000 that's earmarked for Chantry View on the best plan possible. Mr. Mayor, if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion to defer action on the Chantry View until the completion of the
Is there a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber. So we take that without debate then. So all in favor of deferring this until after for clarity, until after we complete the master transportation study. Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor of deferring this motion? Opposed? That's defeated. Okay. So, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, finished then, Cheryl?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like some of the aspects of alternative number 4, but the one thing that is giving me a little bit of concern on this is it relates to the bike lanes. I get the idea of bike lanes. I just don't think that we should be putting them someplace where there's no linkages to anything else. I believe that in the extension or the work that's going to happen on Grosvenor Street from Adelaide over to Chantry View, I believe you're working on a complete street profile in that block that I hope will include bike lanes. I would, if this idea of bike lanes with boulevard parking and that sort of thing is a good idea, there's great potential to, if we do that work on Grosvenor Street, to just put the paint on Grosvenor Street all the way over to High Street, because that stretch of Grosvenor from Chantry View across to High Street does have boulevard parking, and it does have stretches where there is no parking. And, you know, that's a bike route that would connect with the rail trail. A bike route on this little stretch of Chantry View is a nice idea. However, we've just rebuilt most of Huron Street within the last number of years. I don't see Huron Street showing up on any plans for extensive work over the next little while. There are no bike lanes on Huron Street. Lake Street is not showing up for any extensive work either. There's no bike lanes on Lake Street, and Lake Street has a lot of parking right on the street. A bike lane on a tiny stretch of Chantry View, which basically has, I believe, 6 houses fronting it on the north side. It might even only be 5, and then there's 3 and a lot potential on the south side. It's a difficult little stretch of road with, to put parking in there and signs and bike lanes. It's to me it doesn't make sense to try something here. I'm also incredibly concerned about a bike lane that brings people down to the shore. That is a good idea in itself, but when they get down to the shore, we're then expecting them not to continue riding their bikes on the sidewalk at the beach, but we're almost encouraging that kind of activity. I don't see this as the place to start implementing bike lanes. I think there's much better opportunities to start building them in places where they're connecting routes that are taking people to other routes that have bike capacity on them. And in Southampton in particular, Victoria Street gets mentioned all the time. I believe Grosvenor Street is a great street too, which has linkages to the rail trail. I don't think we should be biting off little short blocks or half blocks and doing something that really isn't going to connect with anything. And I don't see the point of that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mike Pyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Amanda, for your report. I'll be supporting option number 4 as written. I just wondering, one of the good things we've done over the years is with any plan of subdivision in neighborhood parks where we've put in, particularly with housing, we've built in connecting links to things, and I understand the point about going to nowhere. However, I did want to ask our Director of Community Services, Jane, with that connecting link that we're talking about putting a bike lane in that area. What's your perspective on this from a trails marked trails perspective?
Yes, certainly. The connecting link certainly will be advantageous for the Great Lakes Trail that is going through Saugeen Shores. You will recall that there's been several presentations on that, which will be from the Quebec border all the way up to Espanola. We will be on that trail as of this year, and there will be signage along Huron Street. So this connector will be a nice enhancement to that trail for cyclists to get off, go have lunch, use the washroom facility, and then get back on the trail.
From Huron Street down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Thanks very much, Mike. Councillor Minaj, I think. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fairly obvious to us, maybe not so obvious to the public, that when we went through a hiring process and we thought that we were going to get someone with Amanda's credentials, that it was for this very reason, that we were going to be able to tackle these urban traffic problems and provide urban traffic solutions. And certainly two master plans will support her efforts, but I believe we can look in isolation to 2 blocks and say we may not be coming back there for 20, 30, 40 years, so design it right now. And all right, so the paint is for the cycling area, that's fine, I understand that, but it's also about how we design the width and we put the whole package together. So I will support option 4, but what I'd like to ask Amanda is, instead of deferring, is it prudent, could you see your way through some kind of several-month delay for making a final decision anyway, because those 2 plans are going to come due? Is the timing such that it would work for you, or is it absolutely not going to work?
Mr. Mayor, it doesn't make a difference to us when it is constructed. I can take direction from council as to when you would like to see the construction just by an amendment to the recommendation.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know those 2 plans. When are we going to see those by month this year?
They'll be in the fall. So because we need to time it for the seasonal residents, our first open house isn't until May for the transportation master plan to get that initial input, and then we'll have to have the second information. So it will be the next council that approves that plan.
And to follow your you needed this council to say yes now to follow your plan to complete Chantry View Drive next year.
But for clarity, this council has already said we were going to do this. All we're talking about is the design. We passed it in our budget. So for clarity, all we're talking about is option 1, 2, 3, or 4. We've already approved this. So I think we've had very briefly, Dave, I think we've had enough discussion.
I just want to say, I think it's a great idea. I like the bike lane. Can you please call the question?
Thank you. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is the Planning and Development Staff Report, and it has to do with the subdivision agreement for Madwayosh subdivision, and Jay's going to present.
Yes, this is for Phase 1 of the Madwayosh subdivision from Michael McMillan and Lou Murray. Michael is actually in the audience. And the first phase, as you can see, it's on the attached map, is for 7 lots on the east side of Madwayosh Street. There's a block that's for a future phase of Block 8, and then the remainder, Block 9, is to be dedicated to the town as park. That Block 9, I just want to highlight, wouldn't be your typical urban park. It is a wooded property, and it's intended to remain naturalized. But the town would install some pedestrian connections throughout. So as part of the parkland contribution, Mr. McMillan is also willing to contribute $5,000 to allow the town to consider pedestrian connectivity through Block 9 to other parts of the community in that area. And the town would propose a design and construct that connection at a later date. But lest the concern is that this is an isolated trail, is that we are also working with landowners to the south along Madwayosh to install sidewalks along Madwayosh that would allow a good head start on pedestrian connectivity in that area of town. And that's where I want to leave the report.
Thank you. So we've got, I'll read the recommendation, and we've got to, if we can get it done before 10, I'll need another motion. It's recommended that Council pass a bylaw to authorize a subdivision agreement with Michael McMillan and Lou Murray for Phase 1 of the Madwayosh subdivision. Questions? You've got a question, Mike?
One quick comment. I just want to thank you, Jay, for the presentation to the developer. I think the $5,000 contribution linking to other areas is very, very important, and I just want to say thank you for that.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed of any? That's carried. So, I suspect we're going to go beyond 10 o'clock, and I need a motion. Would the motion to extend beyond 10? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Matheson, all in favor? Oh, that's carried. So we'll go back to our agenda then. So I guess we're down to 4 items there for committee's information, and 3 other reports. And the first one, or the second one, is a report on community conversations on aging. Any questions on that one? Update on the official plan implementation. Start with Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jay, I just have one question. And as an example, I'm talking about on page 5, the housing objective number 3, where you say, or the report says, to require a minimum of 30% of all new housing to be medium or high density development. What is the time frame for that 30%? Is that the time frame of the OP? Is it annually? Is that to 2031?
Yeah, it's up to interpretation, but in my interpretation, it is over the entire time frame of the plan, unless it's otherwise stated.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I spoke to Jay about this offline today as well, and my concern is that we have 3 columns, and we could probably use 5, in my opinion, because we don't have the column that says what Bruce County's official plan says we can or should or must or maybe do, and we don't have the provincial policy statement that says what we should, could, or must do. And certainly when we get into intensification and we get into character, which we saw at the OMB hearing, 510 Market Street notwithstanding, there was, lengthy debate on what constitutes character and what constitutes a neighborhood. And Jay is doing an amazing job trying to solve all that and trying to present something that maybe we have said we want to support, but maybe it's still in opposition to what the Bruce County official plan is saying. So how do we push back through your office, I guess, Mr. Mayor, and say, we're going to recommend that Saugeen Shores official plan delineates the old Port Elgin, the area of old Port Elgin as defined by Richard Devereaux in the OMB hearing. We're going to support that in the future and say that particular place has character, and we want to restrict what can go into that particular area, and then say to your office, Mr. Mayor, that we need you to go back and say to the Bruce County official plan, we're probably in opposition to how you feel about this, but we would like you to rethink your official plan, and we're going to push change from down here back up the ladder, so to speak. So I've asked if we could tally in the Bruce County official plan commentary on each one of where Jay thinks that there's an item or a concern for discussion, and say, Bruce County actually says the opposite, or the provincial policy statement actually says the opposite.
I think for clarity, to understand, first of all, that Bruce County is the approval authority for our plan, and so you can be assured that it conforms. That is one of the, you can assume then that it conforms with the Bruce County official plan, and it conforms with, we have to conform with the provincial policy statement. So as we go through that process, we come up to this final document, our official plan. It gets circulated to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. They have an opportunity to comment. Those are always taken into consideration when we develop our plan, but I think you can safely say that our plan conforms to the Bruce County official plan and the provincial policy statement. So it's not going to say anything different. You're not going to say, first of all, official plans are general policy documents where you have, so you're not going to say anything that's going to be vastly different. So do you want to comment to it, Jay?
I guess I just want to comment is that we were highlighting this in this particular way here, and that I'm asking for that the town might consider updating its infill policies, not because I think there's any major conflict with any provincial or county document, but I think that it's a strategic priority of the town that the town wants to facilitate appropriate growth, and so that when appropriate, and I'm thinking not in this budget year, as I tried to explain in the report, where workload is pretty good, pretty heavy already, that when it's appropriate, we'd like the council and the town to consider updating those infill policies. That's all.
I think in whatever your suggestion is, if you were thinking of doing that as a standalone amendment, or I think this, I really like how you brought this all together, but I think these are thoughts for when you do a comprehensive review of the entire official plan. And then is when you have all of those discussions and craft your plan as how you want it here, and then see if it gets approval through municipal affairs in the county. Councillor Minaj.
This is the official 5-year opportunity to revise our official plan.
Go ahead, Jay.
It's not explained in this report. This is not our formal 5-year review under the Planning Act. That would be a separate budget discussion when it's appropriate, I would say, at the next budget discussion.
So follow up to one other point. So what you're telling me is that there's no future in looking to make a zoning bylaw change that says we're going to rezone the old Port Elgin, established Port Elgin boundaries that were discussed by Richard Devereaux in the OMB hearing, 510 Market Street, and rezone that to a special category and say, now that it's in this special category in this new zone, you can only do the following.
No, I didn't say that at all. I mean, that's why we get applications all the time, and if you can change the zoning bylaw at any time if you want to make an application to it, and if you can make the application, whether it gets changed or not. I think that was a very good example of, those all of those documents were considered. It ended up at the board, which is an independent arbitrator, and a decision was made based on those existing documents. So, but we can change the zoning at any time. I think we're getting off track here a little bit, but was there another comment? Vice Deputy Mayor Hugh.
It's just a question, and I don't know if Jay can answer it. One of the boxes under the Arts, Culture, and Heritage section, it's about providing opportunities for the display of art and cultural elements in public areas of the community. You've got a success marked as secured commitments from developers to provide space and or contributions for art.
Yes.
We've never heard that here. That's exciting. Can you say anything more about
Well,
what
there's
that
two.
is?
There's two, and it's maybe they go unnoticed, but there's two developments. One in Southampton, one in Port Elgin. In Southampton, we received permission from the landowner who developed the subway to permit town to use the north face wall of his building if we could come up with some art feature. It would cost us the money, but it's at least we have the legal permission to use that space. And in Port Elgin, we were secured from Ideal Supply a contribution for it. Maybe I'm being too generally maybe I stated too generally in the report, is that it could be used to enhance landscaping in the area, but we could also use it to enhance art features in the area as well.
Deputy Mayor Sherwin.
Two quick questions. One, when is the next 5-year review of the OPJ?
Per the Act, it's 5 years after it's been in effect. We count from the date the county approved it in 2014, so that would put it 2019.
Next year. Okay, thank you. And the other question just is, in that first line, growth management, you have 140 jobs created, and I just wonder, how do you get that number? Where does that number come from?
I think that one's from StatsCan. We just took their number from 2012 for jobs, and we got their number for 2016 as well.
So that's just the number of jobs created in town altogether, not necessarily related specifically to anything we've done with regard to the OP.
No, I mean, this is a major weakness of our just the way we collect information is that we rely on other organizations to collect data, and we don't control what data that is sometimes.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Don? Councillor Madison?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So back to the arts question. So with the subway, are we talking something like another Hilgendorf-ish mural type art?
The developer didn't commit to providing any art. It would be up to the town to provide a feature that they like that can be secured on that property.
So again, is that like the Hilgendorf murals we see all over the place?
It could be like what's out at the Shoppers Drug Mart, where they're more of a mounted collage, I guess, on the not painted directly on the brick.
Okay. So I think that's the end of our. Well, there's one other item there: council remuneration and expenses. Any questions on that? Motion to adjourn then. Councillor Madison and Deputy Mayor Charbonneau. All in favor? We're adjourned.